My name is Shantell Martin, and I'm the host of What's the Point? I'm an artist from Southeast London. I also lived in Japan for a bunch of years. I'm mostly known for my large-scale line drawings, live performances, and talks. This is a conversation series dedicated to exploring why artists create art and the forces that influence us. Every few years, I find myself questioning why I make art and what's the point of it. We just make it, we share it, and then one day we die and we definitely aren't making things anymore then. It sounds kind of harsh, but it's true. When I'm having one of these existential moments, I like to pick up the phone and ask other artists what they think the point of making art is and why they keep creating and making it. These conversations usually teach me things that help me see my own challenges in a new light. So I want to share them unedited with those who might be asking themselves similar questions. Join me as I sit down with artists and friends to talk about their reasons for doing what they do and why they continue to create. This episode contains mature themes and discussions that may not be suitable for all audiences. We believe in open and honest conversations, which sometimes means exploring topics that can be sensitive or challenging. Listener discretion is advised. I'm so happy to introduce today's guest, Shyama Golden. I'm a huge fan and actually have her work at home and stare at it all the time. Shyama is a Sri Lankan-American painter with a background in design and illustration. Her work is theatrical, colourful, and otherworldly in many ways. It explores themes of identity and performance, and it's been featured pretty much everywhere. New York Times, LA Times, Netflix. It's been exhibited in a whole gamut of different galleries and spaces, and also a museum in Sri Lanka. Please welcome Shyama Golden. Firstly, we'll start with, how do we say your name correctly? Because I think this is something...
This is a good public service.
Yeah.
It's Shyama Golden, and I used to tell people that it rhymes with llama. Now I tell people, that would mess people when I say Shlama, or something, they would still mess it up. So now I say, think of M. Night Shyamalan, because it's spelled exactly like the director's name. No relation, but
yeah,
it's pronounced the exact way and spelled the same way, so that helps people.
So people would say Shyama.
Yeah.
Because I think there's an extra A in there or something that throws people off.
Well, it's a Y. It's silent Y.
The silent Y.
Yeah. Yeah. My name used to be Shama Lee when I was born, actually. My grandmother said that was unlucky. So my mom removed the Lee part.
Have you ever thought about adding it back in?
No, because honestly, it's too girly for me, I think.
It's funny because my name is Shantell May.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And I used to use it.
Yeah.
And I think it's funny because it's like Shantell May.
Yeah.
But I decided, I dropped it a long time
Similar
ago.
vibe to Shama Lee, actually.
Yeah. Yeah. In a different life, you would have been Shyama Lee and I would have been Shantell May.
Right. It would have changed who we are, though.
Yeah. So today, I'd love to find out a little bit more about you and your background. And, it's not often that I have a friend in that's also one of my favorite artists. So I'm excited to kind of share and understand and find out a little bit more about the beginnings of how you became you.
Yeah.
Tell us about your earliest memory with art, either making it or experiencing it.
It's hard because we all start drawing just as soon as we can hold a crayon. Yeah. So, I know my mom saved all these drawings I made when I was really little, and they're just scribbles and stuff. And I think my memories are a little muddled because I remember the things she saved more than my actual firsthand memory of doing them because they're so old. I wouldn't remember doing them. Yeah. But it was when I started drawing these people that had those triangle people where the waist is the two segments of the body are triangles.
So the waist is the point of the triangle?
Yeah, the waist is the point of the triangle.
Yeah.
The bathroom woman kind of.
Sounds very Bauhaus.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah.
And drawing horses, honestly. I started drawing horses more than I drew people at first. Wow. That was a weird obsession, and I thought I was a horse, and I would go around walking and saying clip clop and stuff. And I just was obsessed with drawing horses. That's my first real memory, actually, is I would just constantly draw horses. And I lived in Texas, and there was this thing called rodeo art, and it's a competition that happened every year. And I would draw some horse thing for that competition like every year of my entire grade school. So that's probably my firsthand memory.
Did you ever
before
win?
I started. I did. I won a lot of that.
Oh, really?
Yeah. One time, actually, someone like found something I had thrown away in a trash can and like entered that, and they won something from that.
Yeah.
I was just that obsessed with drawing horses that.
So they entered it on behalf of you, or they entered it for
No, they
themselves?
entered it as their own thing, and I don't. Yeah, it was actually kind of like flattering that they would do that.
That's pretty amazing that your mother was able to keep some of the work from when you were a kid.
Yeah.
So I'm guessing you're probably an only child then?
Yeah.
Because I'm like, when there's more than one sibling, that's not happening.
Yeah, only child. My parents were in their 30s when they had me too, so yeah.
So they were organized.
Yeah.
Yeah. Growing up in Texas, going to art rodeos, what was that like as a kid? I can't even imagine going to see horses and rodeos and, being in Texas as a kid. What was that like?
I mean, I loved the animals. I was just like, it's like kind of just was awesome to go and see and pet the horses. I was obsessed with that since I was a little kid because my parents studied agriculture and they went to, they were both working and studying at Texas A&M. And there was this like horse research facility where anyone could, it was like they researched what kind of food to give horses. My parents weren't working on that, but like anyone could go and just like pet the horses or interact with them. And that was just my favorite memory as a kid to do.
Do you remember if those drawings were with like pencils or pens or, markers?
A lot of pencils. I was really into Prismacolors actually. As I got a little bit, I don't know, maybe like second grade or older.
What's Prismacolors?
They're this colored pencil that's actually pretty high quality. It's like very waxy. I don't know, like almost like oil paint in a way, like how it's rich. That's a good way of saying it. The colors are really rich and they have like hundreds of colors. So yeah, that was a favorite medium. And also Microsoft Paint. I would draw pixel by pixel.
Wow.
One of the first other memories I have of making art was a portrait of the Spice Girls that I drew one pixel at a time, like very lovingly.
That would be amazing if you still had that.
I unfortunately don't. I wish I did.
Yeah. And, when you have drawings from the past like that, they're not in your possession, like your mum has them. Do you ever feel like you want to do something with them or archive them or display them or, document them?
I don't anymore. I think, that's not who I am anymore.
Yeah. So you're not kind of attached to them in a way of like the greater body of your work.
No.
That's nice. You just kind of let them go. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I love the Microsoft Paint Spice Girls.
Yeah.
That would be pretty amazing.
That one I do wish I had.
Yeah.
That would be good to like blow up a wall size.
Exactly. I was going to say we should blow that up. What was your school life then when you were younger? Were you creating art in school? Were you a shy kid? Were you a popular kid? Like, were you doing sports? Like, what was your school life like at a younger age?
I was not doing sports at all, like opposite of that, whatever the opposite is.
Yeah.
I was really into art class. I liked English class. I loved reading stories. I liked like biology. I didn't really like math that much, and just certain, and certain subjects. I don't know, like I was really like very particular on the interests I had. I was definitely nerdy, but talkative. And like I really just like lit up when I was in art class the most.
Yeah.
I remember one year, like the gym coach was just like, he like didn't understand how I could be so bad at because my dad would actually take me to the basketball court and try to help me shoot hoops. And my dad's not like athletic either, but he would just like try to help me to just not be terrible. And like even with all that practice, I still would never be good. And the gym teacher finally saw like one of my drawings and was like, "Oh, I understand." He seriously had an epiphany. He was like, "I realize that some people are just good at some things and not good at other things. Like you can't always make someone good at every single thing."
He was like, "Oh, that's why you're not good at this, because you're good at that."
Exactly. Yeah, he realized that's where all the talent that was lacking from my athletic.
Versus you just weren't trying.
Yeah.
That's super fun. And then, so you said English as well, and you loved reading as a kid.
Yeah.
So do you remember learning to read? Like, how was like the process for learning to read and write when you was younger? Did it come very just organically, or do you remember like having any issues there, or what was your journey like there?
No, it was really an obsession. I would read like novels like in bed after my parents were asleep, like just constantly read. Like that was something I really loved to do. And as a kid, it was like something I loved so much. And then weirdly in my 20s and stuff, I just kind of like stopped reading completely. Yeah. And then more recently, like I've been reading a ton now, but through audiobooks, because while I'm painting, it's easy for me to just like read a book a day or a book every 2 days or something.
Do you feel like when you're painting, you can listen to the words?
Yes, I do. Because the thing is with not at first, not while I'm sketching. Because while I'm sketching, I'm actually really thinking about the ideas. So then I don't want to listen to an audiobook.
Yeah.
But I don't listen to anything actually when I'm just sketching or brainstorming ideas. But when I'm executing, there'll be like a long period of time where I'm like painting every blade of grass or whatever. That is that happens through your body, not through your mind. So like my body's busy with the painting and my brain is occupied with the book. And it's actually better that way.
Yeah. Actually, I never really thought of that. You know, there's a separation between your body and your mind when you're listening or doing something. Because, when I listen to audiobooks, I find like, I don't remember what happened for the last 10 minutes because I was in my mind.
Yeah.
So you have to kind of like, if it's a physical thing, like you're running or painting something tedious, then it's easier to listen to.
Yeah. I mean, for me, it's more like... It's like keeping my mind's hands tied so they don't get in the way of what my body is doing.
Because otherwise, you're restraining yourself.
Yeah. Because otherwise my brain is like, this isn't any good. Like, you should start over, or, like just all these weird negative thoughts that just come constantly.
Yeah.
And a more enlightened person wouldn't need the book and could just, meditate on the painting. But for me, I find it at this stage that I'm at, it's easier for me to completely like keep the brain busy with something stimulating so that I can use my like kind of muscle memory to do the painting and intuition,
That's really interesting because I often say that time is the enemy when you're creating or trying to be creative, because when you have too much time, then you think, and when you think, you hesitate, you become insecure, you think what someone else might do, you might doubt yourself.
Yeah.
So you have that experience too?
Yeah, actually kind of like, I learned a lot from you because just watching your performances and like, honestly, you're just so opposite from me in the way that your practice functions, because it's so like, you are letting your ideas flow like freely. And I am very much blocking all my ideas constantly. And like, you're someone I can learn a lot from, and I always try to learn from because I want to get more of that energy of just like the free flowing, like not blocking, not restricting the things that are coming up from not my mind, I don't even know, like, from the intuition.
If you're working the opposite of me in a way, and I think this is probably why I love your work so much, because we do have that opposite. So if you're working the opposite of me, like what is your process when you're making a painting? Like how does it all come together?
Well, it starts with actually writing, but not writing in a way that anyone would want to read it. It's more just like jotting down notes. Like I have a lot of notes, and like, even when I'm reading a book or something, I'll think of something and write down some notes, or have a conversation with a friend, write down some notes about the seed of an idea. And so it all starts with that, and there's these long pages of notes. And then I kind of like usually any of these things they're kind of like half-baked ideas. So I kind of usually end up combining two of them, or each one, is waiting for its partner or something.
Yeah.
And then when I hear someone say something, that's the thing I need, to complete this idea. And I kind of like put them together that way. And then I'll start, then it'll bring a very clear picture in my mind usually. And then I sketch that as thumbnails, like really, really small sketches. And then I'll make that bigger. And then I've recently, I used to draw, normal sketchbook, but now I'm using the iPad because it does help me. I have this weird fear of wasting materials and stuff. Like it's a little bit of inhibition, which is my whole problem. So I feel like the iPad helps get rid of the inhibition because there's infinite paper. So I can just keep, there's no fear of doing anything wrong or making a mistake. And I'll just like enlarge the really blurry thumbnail into a bigger canvas and then kind of trace over that, with more detail. And then keep going from, and then like I try not to make it fully complete, but then when I'm at a point where it's somewhat rough, I'll project that onto a canvas. And that's kind of cool because then I can feel how it is at scale. And what's also good is, when you work large, you want it to look good from far away as well as close up. So like through my process inherently, I'm seeing it far away and close up because the thumbnail sketch is the far away thing. And it's like what someone's going to see from across the room. And then also, then when I'm working on it in real life, I'm seeing it close up constantly because I have to work close up. And then I'm always stepping away from the painting. It's like constantly stepping like at least 10 feet away from the painting to look at it or looking through a mirror. Just because like you get so used to seeing something that you can't judge it anymore.
So you look back into a mirror to look at the piece?
Yeah, and the mirror also doubles the distance. So that gets you even further away from it, and then it flips it, which helps you have fresh eyes. So then you can see the things that are kind of wonky and see if it works from far away. And like, yeah, the far away thing is actually very important.
That's really interesting. And for you, when it works, or if it feels like it works, what is that feeling? Is it just an intuitive sense of like, oh, this feels good? Or like, how do you know if it works or not?
Oh, it's a really strong feeling. It's more like I know when it doesn't work. And then when that goes away, then I'm good.
Oh, okay. So it's like the doesn't work feeling is much stronger.
Yeah.
And then when that's not present, it works.
Yeah, exactly. There's not a real strong feeling if it works. There's the feeling of like it doesn't work and I keep working until that goes away.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
And like the initial notes you take down, are you taking those down on paper in a notes app or like somewhere else?
They're in the notes app because that way it's just in one place, you know.
Do you like organize them somehow, or is it just like you start
No,
new
they're
notes?
not organized at all. Oh, they're organized in some way. So I have notes that are from books. That's a special one. I have a note thing just for words that I don't know because I'm like, you know, running into words I don't know or words that I like, you know, words that I want to use. Like that's a separate notes category. And then there's one for movies I want to see, but then also the painting ideas. And then there's paintings for different series. I mean, like I'm working on the Yaka series right now. So I have a Yaka series, you know, whole list of notes for that.
Not to jump around too much because my mind is all jumping around because I want to ask too many questions. But reading books, you were reading a lot when you were younger, then you took a little break and then you came back to reading. Mm-hmm. Is the type of books similar to what you read when you were younger?
It's actually pretty different.
Oh, yeah?
Because, I mean, I used to read mostly fiction books, you know, and I still love fiction books, but I'm more picky about fiction books than nonfiction, so it's just harder to find good ones. And it's hard to know if you like a fiction book by the description, you know? Because every book is just like, a family has a dark secret and it's really unexpected or something. That's like every book's description. So I don't know how to choose, you know?
Yeah.
But some of my favorite books are fiction books. I just read less of them and way more nonfiction because that's easy to know whether I'm interested in the subject matter.
Yeah. And then it's interesting, you know, like drawing on the iPad. I draw a lot more now with my iPad than I do with notebooks. You know, I used to go through notebooks all the time and just fill them up. And I can't remember the last time I filled up a notebook because I've been using my iPad so much. And there is something really interesting you said about, you know, being less precious with working digitally on the iPad.
Yeah.
And I think there is something, especially with paper, you feel like, you know, you got to live with the mistake or you got to live with what you make because it's permanent.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're working with an iPad, you just press undo.
Yeah.
And you can reverse time.
It's good and bad.
Yeah.
It's good and bad. There's a little bit of sadness for not having those sketches.
Yeah.
Because when I do sometimes go through my stuff and see my old sketches and it's like this nice thing to have, you know?
Yeah. I forget quite often, but sometimes when I'm drawing on my iPad, I'll just record it. You know,
oh, yeah.
Yeah, if you're using Procreate, you can record the strokes. And
it's
then,
automatic, actually.
Yeah, is it automatic?
Yeah.
And then if you're not doing that, you're drawing something else, you can just, you know, pull it down and record it that way too.
Yeah,
which
that's
is sometimes
a nice thing.
Fun.
Yeah.
And so you said Yaka series. For people that don't know, who are the Yakas? What are Yakas?
Yeah, well, Yakas are... It's one of those things that's kind of hard to directly translate. It's kind of like a demon or a spirit. It's a spirit, maybe that's a good way of putting it. But they're kind of tricksters, and they come from Sri Lankan mythologies. And I was interested in referencing them because they are so old that we don't even know the origin of them. You know, I mean, and they go back to like the indigenous, you know, like traditions in Sri Lanka, like even before like Buddhism came from India. So I think that's super interesting just to like go back to something so ancient. So we're talking about like more than 2,500 years ago.
Wow.
So like just reading those histories was really interesting to me. And I also just liked that this felt like something. Okay, so they're referenced in exorcism rituals where dancers will dress up as yakas and kind of perform your demons leaving you after you give them an offering, with the help of a like shaman kind of person. So it's called Adara, the medicine, the person that does the healer.
What's it
Adara?
called? Adara?
Yeah. And so, but the dancers will dress as yakas, and this ritual is called the toil, and it happens all night long. And there's like the whole village comes and watches, and it's actually like it's both scary and funny. And also like the yakas are that way as well. They're both scary and funny, and I liked that. Sort of, you can't put them in a very specific box. People don't like them, but they're also not the same way as like the Western concept of a demon.
Yeah.
But actually, the more I looked into this, I realized even in European cultures, demon used to be daemon, which was not a necessarily totally bad thing. And that's also a pagan belief. So it's like before Christianity, they were like they had a different concept of what a demon was.
And do they show up in other types of ceremonies, or it's kind of from what you've read, it's particularly this kind of like death ceremony of like, in a way, exorcising the demons after someone's passed?
Well, it's not after someone's passed. It's actually while you're alive and you're
really?
having a mental ailment.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Or physical ailment. But, usually physical ailments, you use Ayurvedic medicine.
Yeah.
So it was kind of like the mental health part, because Ayurvedic medicine would be used for your physical ailments and still is. And this kind of exorcism would be used for mental ailments that can't be solved in other ways.
Yeah. That's really interesting that they took it potentially from like a movement or a dance perspective.
Yeah.
And if you were to walk through Sri Lanka today, where might you see these yakas?
Well, I mean, unfortunately, it's very hard to see a toil. I tried.
Yeah.
I've seen this performance, but it was done like for tourists, where it's like, it's just a way to continue the practice, but it's not for the original purpose anymore.
Yeah.
Because people can't afford to do it. Really. But they do have something called the Gammadua, which is still occasionally done. And that is where you do something kind of like, it's like a dance to, like for prosperity for the village or for the crops to grow or, things like that. It's like actually kind of performing it for the whole community, not for one person.
And can you describe what they look like?
The events?
The yakas.
Oh, the yakas, yeah. Well, they look kind of like Muppets, I guess, since you don't have a visual of them right now. Kind of like, in my mind, the quickest way to describe it would be kind of like Muppets, but like scary ones. Yeah. And there's like these like the masks that they wear are made in really one town in Sri Lanka called Ambalangode, and they have been made there forever. I mean, they're made in other places too, but that's the place where they're traditionally made, and they have like a rich history of this like carving practice.
That's amazing.
And you can still go there and see, them carving the masks and stuff.
And then, the masks, I guess it's something that is, when people go there, they'll sometimes bring them back and bring them into their homes. And
yeah, there's lots of different kinds of masks. So there's other kinds of masks that you'll put over, and it's related, but you'll put them over your door to ward away unseen spirits that might cause harm.
When you're making a series of work or a body of work, how do you know, like, how many pieces you're going to make, or, what characters or entities or archetypes or symbols that you might put into them? Is that something that you're using that same process of like notes and, kind of storyboarding and thumbnails? Is that the same process when you're doing like a whole body of work? Yeah,
storyboarding was the exact word I was going to use, actually. That's definitely how I think about it, especially when it's narrative. But, I've been thinking lately about more, again, taking inspiration from you, but like, I know you don't like storyboard things out or something. And I kind of like that idea. There's something very, like, I guess romantic, but also cool about like just jumping off a cliff like you do, where you just trust the process. And I see really cool work coming from that process, the way you work. So I want to try that. I'm just a little, I'll get there one day, but.
It is interesting in that different approach because, often people say, well, like what body of work are you working on? And I kind kind of see it as like my whole career is a body of work. So it's not really a body, it's more like a tale.
Yeah.
Like I'm just working on a tale of work and it's all connected.
Right.
And this work speaks to the next work and speaks to the next work because there's a common theme that goes through all of them versus like this is the New York series.
Right. That's an artificial separation in a way, right?
Yeah. And like there's nothing wrong with that. I think just personally, I've always struggled trying to separate a series of work and put it in a box. Even though I think maybe I get there by doing different types of projects or different types of industries. But from like the drawing perspective, I feel like for me, it's all connected.
Yeah, definitely. Your drawings are all connected. I feel like you did that series with your grandmother, though.
Yeah.
That felt like a different body.
Yeah.
But I mean, same spirit, but like definitely a different body of work in a way.
Yeah. And I think that's also where there is a difference, where there's collaboration involved.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
So yeah, I collaborate with my grandmother for like 15 years. And we had this kind of like similar in a way, like instructional then executional work. You know, I gave her instructions and then she made the work. And then there was that dialogue there, which was super fun. Your background, you know, you studied graphic design and then you went into painting. So tell us a little bit about that journey of, you know, studying graphic design. Something I did actually. I went to St. Martin's and did a BA in graphic design.
Yeah.
And then revolted and didn't want to touch a computer.
Yeah.
But what was your story there with graphic design?
I actually did it for a long time. I did it for 10 years, and I felt connected to it. My parents are scientists, but my uncle in Sri Lanka, he has like a small like family-owned printing press that's part of his house, and they publish like Ayurvedic books and, you know, language books and stuff that are, a lot of them written by our family, and or, you know, people that are close to him, but. I would watch him design fonts. You know, as a little kid in Sri Lanka, I would see him designing fonts. And so I think it must have subconsciously made me think like, oh, I could do this. You know, this is something I could see myself doing or something. I felt connected to it. And I did enjoy graphic design. But ultimately, I just got tired of promoting, you know, companies, I guess.
Yeah.
Like it just felt like, at first I was like very starry-eyed and like happy to do anything for anyone. But then I got more interested in like telling human stories than, I just don't want to sell things. And I guess that got kind of, you know, in the way that I.
Is it because that process was more of it, like they give you a brief and then you have to go away, execute that brief and then take feedback and change it, and then it's for a product type thing?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. There were good things about it too. I loved working with really talented people and like I made some stuff I was proud of, but like I love type design. That part, I got really obsessed with type design. I took a class when I was in New York at Cooper Union for that, and I really enjoyed playing around with that because I love like tinkering on something for a long time. I mean, that's kind of my painting too. It's type design's the same way. You keep tinkering with something until like you're like, okay, this doesn't bother me anymore. And so I do really love that. But each one of these trades, it takes a lifetime to get good at, really. So that's kind of why I felt like, okay, I like that, but like I only have one lifetime. And I mean, unless you're, you know, Leonardo da Vinci or whatever, you know, you kind of have to focus at some point. And I think it's still good to branch out again as well, but I need a period of focus on painting. And I'm interested in other things as well, like, you know, maybe collaborating with Paul, like my husband, on filmmaking stuff, and like other and sculpture is something I've always played around with. But I feel like those are all very adjacent to the painting versus like graphic design feels a little separate.
Do you think that the graphic design informed the projects you've done, for example, the book covers and, you know, kind of magazine covers and stuff like that? Has that informed that in the way that you've created those projects, or were those projects more related to your painting?
Well, yeah, those projects, definitely the graphic design background helped a lot to do those, because I was even creating the type for some of the covers.
Oh, wow.
And like, I really wanted to, because it felt so, it's like one thing for me. If it's a cover, the type and the image, it's like just all one thing. So I did definitely get to, and I love that kind of project. That's like the one thing I'm like still interested in doing from that graphic design background is like the book covers, because I love books, and and then I get to do the drawing, and then also I love, but it feels like a collaboration with the author. It is. I mean, ultimately they do they don't choose the illustrator, but they do get to kind of weigh in on how they feel about it during the process.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
It's funny, I did a book cover for a Penguin like sci-fi.
You did?
And then after I realized, I should read the book. Because I'm not a huge reader. It takes me a long time to read. I read like one book a year. So it actually came out and then I was like, I should read this to make sure I like the book.
Because everyone's going to ask you if it was good.
Yeah. So then I read the book like a year later. So tell us, book covers, you love that. You perhaps would like to do more of that. What's that process like for people who perhaps are curious to do a book cover themselves?
Well, the process is, I think a lot of people don't know that you don't get together with the author and do it. Like, that's not a good idea. Usually, you need to have a portfolio of work that shows somewhat similar work. And then an art director from a publishing company will approach you and kind of match you. They would have already had you in mind for a specific project, and they would match you with a book. But also the way it works is that art directors are constantly scouring, Instagram and every and whatever, Pinterest and everything, every place that they find kind of like recommendations for artists, and they kind of have these lists, and they know, this person, really specializes in this type of imagery and this vibe, and then they'll have that list going, and then it could take years after you wind up on that list for them to have a book that matches, and then they'll be like, okay, I could see this working, and then they'll email you and kind of send you the brief of the book, and then it's up to you, and it's up to you whether.
I guess it's maybe one of those hard things where it's, if you haven't made a book cover, then it's kind of hard to do a book cover because you might not be on one of those lists. Or
no, not necessarily. It doesn't need to be like that because they're looking at what kind of work you're doing. If your work is very sci-fi fantasy or something, then they'll be like, when they have a book like that, they'll match you up with that. Or even if you have like a very specific background, like if they know that I'm Sri Lankan and there's like a Sri Lankan author talking about something, then they might think like, this could be a match, things like that.
And then when they approach you with something like that, do they say, hey, like, we'd love you to do this book cover, here's a flat fee, it's for this book, and then here's the agreement? Is it kind of straightforward like that, or is there some back and forth?
Yeah, it's pretty much like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good. So it's pretty simple. If it comes your way, then you can just say yes or no.
And they definitely come to artists, like fine artists as well. I don't really like that word, but that's just what it's called. But yeah, they'll come to people who aren't in the illustration industry.
And then so to kind of pivot from there, tell us a little bit about your color palette and your choices with your color, because I think that's something I've noticed throughout the body of your work, from kind of some of the earlier digital work that I've seen to the painting. There is a very strong palette that is present throughout all of that. Where did that palette come from? Or is it colors that you've discovered, that you've drawn to, that you naturally gravitate towards? Were they very intentional, accidental?
I think I don't really think about the individual colors as much as I think about how they play off of each other.
Yeah.
That's the whole thing. It's not about, and same thing when I used to be a graphic designer, it's not about the font. It's like, what fonts are you combining? What's the energy that they're creating together? So I'm always thinking about how the colors reverberate off of each other, and more pairs of colors or triads or whatever. But yeah.
That's really fun.
Yeah.
And you mentioned collaborating with your husband, Paul. Mm-hmm. Can you tell us a little bit more about those collaborations?
Yeah, we haven't done a whole lot of collaborations yet. We're constantly talking about lots of ideas, but they don't always go anywhere. But I mean, we have tons of silly ideas all the time. But like, we did have one collaboration already. There was this painting cat squatch that I did that we actually wrote a book about it too. But the book keeps evolving as we keep changing over the years. So that's why it makes it hard to release the book. But it's basically like, this is, again, with the whole process. Like, we were kind of snowed in. We lived in New York like 1 week and just started writing down words, like things that we both like. And I wrote down, I guess, like cats and Sasquatch and, Yeti and stuff. And he also had Sasquatch and Yeti on his list. And we were like, okay, how could we combine these things? And then he came up with the word cat squatch. And then we both started drawing what cat squatch would look like. And he drew a giant cat monster, and I drew like a bunch of little tiny cats that like make a monster. Because I think that's more like the way my brain works is like, could it really happen? Like I want it to be like something that feels like almost like you could see this happening, but not quite, you know, like it could, but it could. So that's like all of my stuff. Usually it's like,
it's got that like dreamlike quality where you feel like you could have dreamed it.
Yeah.
But it also has that realism to it as well.
Yeah. And like somehow plays on reality with like, oh yeah, the cats probably would run away from home and want to start their own society and live in the forest without us or something. Yeah.
And then, because I think I've seen that painting, Cat Spots, because it almost looks like a fur jacket in a way. But it's all the cats coming together.
Yeah.
It's super fun. Working with galleries is something you've been doing for the last few years.
Yeah.
Tell us about that experience.
That experience it's been totally different, you know. It was another, because at first I started, you know, as a designer, then I'd be working with art directors, then I briefly worked as an illustrator, still working with art directors.
Yeah.
And then working as a painter is totally different because you're just doing, no one's asking you for sketches or to see what you're doing. You just kind of have to do it and then hope everyone likes it. And it's a much bigger risk. It's less of a collaboration. It's more like you're really on your own doing it for the most part. You need to have friends that you can get critiques from and things, but, or, you know, anyone that you can get critiques from. But it's a very different process. It's much more lonely. But I think I really like the challenge of it though.
And what's the challenge? The scale of the project or a deadline, or, you know, what are some of those challenges?
Well, you're making work that nobody ever asked for.
Yeah.
You know, that's the biggest difference. Nobody asked for this.
Yeah.
Nobody cares if it exists or doesn't exist, you know?
And that's interesting because, you have to prompt yourself and give yourself that brief to create something. Yeah, that's an interesting concept that no one asked for.
Yeah.
But they should enjoy when it's existing. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so what does it feel like when you do make something that no one asked for, and then you get to put that in a show? What's that feeling like? Or what's the response that you've had in some of those experiences?
I mean, I'm very surprised to have had a good response because I feel like it's super weird stuff that's just from the back of my head, you know, and like I'm purposely giving people something that I think they haven't seen, or like even just referencing the Sri Lankan folklore. I think it would be a lot safer to reference like Greek mythology or the Bible or something that people are already used to in Western art. But like I'm bringing these other stories that they aren't already familiar with. But I think underneath it is a very universal story that's just about these like mental struggles where I get in my own way constantly. Yeah.
And because you are, you know, I think something very interesting about your work is it has that mix of, you know, Sri Lankan and American and, you know, all the things that kind of make up you. Are you, in a way, exploring your identity as you do that?
Yeah, I mean, I think you can't not do. We're all exploring our identity, no matter what your background is. Like when you're making art, that's ultimately what it is. Identity or lack of identity too, because I don't always feel like I have an identity because I lived in, you know, in New Zealand and Sri Lanka briefly, you know, as a kid, and in Texas, and then lived in California and New York and like so many different places and like growing, just, I don't know. I don't feel like I have this like very strong identity really. It feels more confused like than anything else. But yeah, I think I'm exploring both. Like maybe identity might even be, sometimes it's how people perceive me, but it's not even how I perceive myself.
Have you had any experiences where people have perceived you in a way that is extremely different from how you perceive yourself?
Well, I think, you know, yeah, of course. I mean, people, you know, they'll always assume things about you based, like they'll always assume I'm a vegetarian or assume that, you know, like, I don't know, whatever, certain things just by looking at you. But like, and there's nothing, it's fine, I don't have a problem with that, but it's human nature. We try to put people in these categories so we can quickly assume stuff about them, and that's human nature. But it does happen, and like I think it happens to every single person.
That's an interesting one. He's like, oh, you look like a vegetarian? Why?
Every single restaurant. And I would like to be a vegetarian. It's a much better thing to be. But like, I think maybe I'm even not a vegetarian because everyone assumes that I'm.
That's interesting. So you're like pushing against the.
But again, it's still having no free will because I'm just doing it because.
Yeah. So you mentioned, kind of in that vein, your family back in Sri Lanka were involved in like Ayurvedic kind of practices or teachings and putting those books together. Do you know anything about that as a practice, or holistically as like a practice of what you should eat or not eat? Do you bring any of that into your kind of diet? Were you taught any of that?
No, because it's not my parents didn't do any of that, but they studied agriculture. They're very good at plant stuff.
Yeah.
Like I definitely do take inspiration from their love of plants, though. When I was a kid, I actually wanted to be, I knew I loved to draw, and I did like biology and botany and plants and stuff. So I thought like, oh, I could be a scientific illustrator.
Yeah.
But then I would just be drawing like splayed arms and muscles and stuff all day. And I think I would have probably like, I need novelty too. So I think like being a painter, I just like being able to drive my own practice and be like, okay, I've had enough of that. Now I'm going to do this.
Since they studied agriculture, what do they think of your, some of your drawings have these archetypes of almost these human trees and, bushes, and do they ever comment on those and say, hey, like this should look like this? Or
No, not at all. Not at all. They're more entertained by the yakas, because they think it's like funny that I do that. And they think it's even funnier that people like them.
Yeah.
They're like, people like yakas, wow. Because in Sri Lanka, it's like something people are kind of embarrassed about.
Yeah.
Because it's more like a practice that like it's superstitious, and it's like this thing done in the village and stuff. But like, yeah, it's more, and also with colonialism and everything, the British would make us feel like we need to let go of all these things that are part of the traditions. But, everything, and I'm not even saying that those practices are purely good either. People do abuse those practices as well, and they're used to prey on vulnerable people sometimes because the person that's the healer can have a lot of power. But it's more that it's part of our culture and it can evolve. Culture always evolves. It's not static. So I'm part of, I think, the evolution of one tiny branch of the evolution of that culture.
How did you feel having a piece in the Sri Lankan Museum of Art and
Modern
contemporary art?
I felt amazed. I mean, I honestly was I was so flattered, but also just validated in a way. Like, I don't want external validation, but in this particular case, it's just that I know I'm a bit of an outsider. I did live in Sri Lanka for a couple of years, but I grew up here in the US, and I'm using these things that are, ancient Sri Lankan practices. I'm like, are people going to be offended? Are they going to like it? I'm changing it a little bit and using artistic license. And, every person doesn't have to like it, but I'm just happy that it resonates with a lot of people there. And they had like a Q&A, after the exhibition where, I spoke, and then like people from the community were able to like ask me questions, and a lot of young people came too. And it was like really cool because I feel like the younger people like really connected with the work, and they felt like it was so bold because they didn't know you were allowed to do that.
Yeah. So in a way, your work gave them permission.
Yeah.
Or showed them that you can.
Yeah.
That's super fun. It seems like, your parents have been fairly supportive of your work as an artist, and before that as a designer. Have you had some struggles in being able to do what you do, like being an artist? Like, tell us about some of the biggest like challenges or hurdles or struggles that you've come across.
Well, people always see you as whatever you already are.
Yeah.
So it takes a lot of effort to get them to see you in a new way. So like when I was a graphic designer, it was very hard to get hired as an illustrator because people would have to see me that way. So I really had to like delete all of that history from my website and everything. People can't handle seeing those two things together because they really need to put you in a category. And unfortunately, that is just the way it is. There might be a few exceptions, but the vast majority of people, it'll be much easier to just present yourself as one thing if that's the thing you really are trying to transition into, until you become known for that. So I had to do that multiple times. And it's kind of painful. You have to get rid of all these things you're really proud of and not show them anymore. And of course, like we all kind of identify with our work, and then you're getting rid of all these achievements and stuff. And that's very healthy, though.
Yeah.
It's very healthy to be like, yeah, I'm nothing now. I'm nobody. I'm just a baby. I'm starting.
Just a blank canvas.
Yeah, and it's like, who are you? Your question. It's like, who are you? We are not those things that we've achieved at all. So it's healthy to get rid of them every now and then.
Mm-hmm. Have you ever thought about creating new aliases? So that you can keep...
I thought about it, but that's pretty,
It's too much work.
Too much work, yeah.
Yeah. Today, what is your biggest challenge as being do you say painter, fine artist?
I just say artist because that keeps it open, but painter helps people immediately visualize what I do. So I do say that as well. Yeah. But yeah, visual artists, definitely visual artists. I mean, whatever I do, it's usually, that's the primary, medium or primary avenue for the work. The biggest challenge is really that self-confidence, really, and just like feeling like staying true to the first idea without abandoning it. Commitment. And I always admire commitment in other artists too. Committing to something, even if it's not a good idea, can be really impressive. Like I mean, like something that can be very amateurish when you do one of them, when you do 100 of them, can be really brilliant, actually. And it brings a whole new dimension to it.
It's like the power of repetition.
Yeah, because then you go deeper and you find these variations, and just like the feeling of viewing something where someone has committed to something is really impressive. And that's something I aspire to.
So why do you think you find it sometimes hard to commit, or, kind of allow this like self-doubt kind of creep in?
I think it's because I have a different background. I don't have like the pedigree of like other artists.
But do you think that matters?
No, I don't intellectually.
Yeah.
But I truly don't believe that it matters. I mean, I think it probably helps people to have that, but I think we can all get there through different paths. And I think there's advantages to not having the pedigree too, because then your work doesn't look like everyone else that does have that, and after a while, there can be a lot of people that have a pedigree.
Yeah. But what does that mean for you to have a pedigree in like the arts? Like, what does that look like? What does that mean?
Well, there's these credentials, like having a Yale MFA, like there's like these certain credentials that like just get you in the door right away.
Yeah.
But fortunately, people have really forgiven me for not having that. So far, and they've allowed me to just exist in.
Isn't it interesting? Space. It's like, okay, in a way, people can't look at what's in front of them and judge it for how they feel with it. They need to know, like, what's your credentials or who has approved you so that I know if I should or can approve you. This kind of weird, I don't know, like you say, gatekeeping, like scenarios that come in. Have you come across like any of that kind of on your journey where in a way you feel like you're not allowed in because of you're coming from a different path or perspective?
No, I haven't found that, but I wouldn't know if that's happening.
Yeah. And I, as you said, I feel like you are an artist, therefore you are an artist, regardless of how you got there.
Yeah.
And if you're coming from a trained system, all that means is that you learned someone else's ideas.
Yeah.
So without coming through that system, it just means that you have your own ideas and that you've used your own life and your own kind of path and experiences to create the work that you're doing. And like you said, I feel like in a way that gives you so much more to choose from and to build from and in a way like a stronger foundation, because you get to know who you are versus who you are when you imitate or learn about someone else.
Well, I feel like we all are pulling from other artists, no matter what. None of us can exist without being inspired by other artists, even if we don't know it. But what I do have a problem with is that you're kind of supposed to have like a direct lineage to another artist or another, preferably someone dead and from a long time ago.
That's a thing?
Yes, absolutely.
Oh,
You're
wow.
not supposed to be inspired by anyone who's living.
Yeah.
I'm just telling you the rules,
Okay. Yeah, I don't know the rules. So yeah, please
it's good
tell
that
me.
you don't know,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's like you're not allowed to be inspired by someone who's living.
Yeah.
But you should be inspired by someone from a long time ago that is very admired, but not too mainstream either.
Yeah.
Not like, Picasso or something.
Yeah.
like you need to be inspired by someone that's a little bit obscure, but held in high regard and dead from a long time ago.
Yeah.
And be a direct lineage from like two people like that. That's like the formula that I've gained.
Wow.
Or, I mean, that I've understood. But I'm not, though. I mean, I am inspired by hundreds of artists that are both living and dead. And I wouldn't be able to name, I can name artists that I love, but I couldn't name artists that I'm like, oh yeah, these are my, mommy and daddy or something. Like, I just can't do that.
It seems like such an like over academic kind of way to like tick off a box. It's like, look, I've read the books because I know these obscure artists, and it's kind of an insider thing if you know them too. And
well, it puts you in the canon because then you are continuing the legacy of these artists who are very important, and then it means like your value of your painting is high because you're an important, you're the current iteration of them, kind of thing.
Wow, that's a lot of hard work. So speaking of legacy and within that kind of documentation and preservation, do you consider or do you have a practice of documenting your work, pulling it in any inventory systems? How do you archive your work? Or is kind of all of your work out there in the world so you don't have to worry about kind of storing it? Like what's your practice when it comes to like preservation and documentation?
I don't really have any work that I'm like storing.
Yeah.
It's all like just kind of goes out into the world. So far, I've been lucky for it to go away. I mean, people have bought it. But that may change as I become more prolific,
Yeah.
And it takes me a long time to do each piece too. So it's not so much storage or something of the physical works, but I mean, honestly, I gotta start doing that. Like the whole like written down thing of like where everything is. So far, it's like manageable where I have it all in like emails and stuff.
Yeah.
But I definitely need to get on that, like with actually having a system and a spreadsheet. It's on my mind.
Because I use an art inventory system where, you upload a picture of the front and the back and any detail shots, and you can put location, you can put condition report, you can put dimensions in there. And if it changes hands, you can update that if you have that information.
You use an app, right?
I use an app called Art Logic, but there's a few kind of different ones out there, all varying different prices. But because I started much later on, it took me about 2 years to get that all up to date.
Mm-hmm.
So it's definitely a big project.
Yeah.
But personally, I feel like it's nice to know where stuff is and where it goes. And
no, I absolutely have to do it now.
Yeah. And so what's coming up for the future for you?
Well, I will have a solo show coming up at Harper's Gallery in Chelsea, in New York. That's of the work that's currently in my studio. And I've just got like a couple more paintings to do to round out that series.
Yeah.
And that's the big thing that I'm working towards right now.
When you do a new series like that, do you say, hey, out of this series, I'm going to keep one work for myself?
I actually do. Not of every single show, but like the Yaka series has been going over multiple shows. So like I'll keep one of those, there's, and I've so far kept one of every type of painting that I've done so far.
Yeah, I think that's, I really like encourage that, because at some point when you look back, it might be hard to kind of chase work down if you want to put it in a show.
Yeah.
Or if work, is now selling at a crazy value. In a way, you've held on to some of that value because you have some of the physical work.
Yeah.
But then also, as artists, we have this power of reflection, of looking back at ourselves through almost like this diary of the work that we create. And so in a way, you're keeping a little piece of yourself from those different times of who you are.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. It makes sense. The space is an issue, but
yeah. So you have to find, some family and friends you can give, loan agreements
Right.
to, and then store those somewhere. So we've got the show that's coming up in New York, and one more time, what was the date of that?
It's still actually kind of in the works, but it'll be mid-May.
Okay.
It'll be mid-May.
So mid-May, my favorite month of the year.
Yeah.
And then where can people find more of your work?
They can find it on my website and on Instagram. And my Instagram is at shyamagolden.com. Oh, sorry, at Shyama Golden. And it's SHYAMA and then golden like the word. And then my website is shyamagolden.com.
Fantastic. And then just last question, what's the point in making art?
The point, I think, is that, we don't really have a choice. It's our human nature to communicate that way. And it's like, if we didn't have it to either look at or to make, we would be losing a part of our humanity.
Bam. Thank you. Cool. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Cool. Thank you for coming in. I enjoyed that. Thank you for listening to this episode of What's the Point? Recorded at Spotify Studios in Los Angeles. Check out our website made by Eat.studio. Grant Alexander Peters does our theme music, engineering, and editing. Research and pre-show preparation are done by Vern Molidor and Joyce Adams-So from the Shantell Martin studio team. If you like this episode, please consider subscribing to the podcast and leaving a nice 5-star review. Don't forget to check out the show description for more information on today's guest. And you can follow myself and the podcast on Instagram at Shantell_Martin. What's the point? As I try to organize 1, 2, 3, my thoughts, your thoughts, my ideas, my head, buzzing, beehive, organize 1, 2, 3, you in front of me, 1,000 of this, 1,000 of that, your eyes and my eyes, tiny little eyes, 1,000 little eyes that make little pies, baking those little pies, the mystery of this, dizzy in vortex, the mystery of this, busy in vortex, the mystery of this, large space and galaxies, the mystery of this, understanding the ocean, the mystery of this, understanding the sea, the mystery of this, understanding the web and the mystery of this, understanding swarms and the mystery of this, understanding bees and the mystery of this, understanding that web and the mystery of this, understanding spiders and the mystery of this, understanding spiders and the mystery of